In terms of psychedelics, then, when or why would somebody start exploring this? I mean, you've obviously seen a lot of studies over the years and the impact it has on people. Maybe that's a good place to start. What kind of impact is it having on people long term? And when or why would somebody want to explore them?
Well, I think, there are all sorts of reasons. But I think inherently we are a curious species. We're curious about things. This is what drives discovery. This is what drives a lot of creativity, this impulse to understand how things are. And psychedelics provide a window into our consciousness, which is perhaps the most interesting game in town in a certain way, because actually everything is filtered through consciousness. So if we can expand consciousness or use these medicines to explore kind of the limits of conscious experience, uh, then that appeals to people's curiosity. And so I think curiosity is the impulse, and then as people use them, everybody has their own set of problems. I mean, many
Mm.
people have diagnosed problems like depression or PTSD and so on. Everybody's got some degree of that, right? Because I don't think you can live in this world without being traumatized, if it's a territory. And then people experimented with these, and they found that, yeah, these things under the right circumstances can provide relief from those things. They're tools for exploring consciousness, but they also have a therapeutic application. And I'm very much, in favor of all this research and, all this clinical work with psilocybin and other things. I think this is great because in some ways, mental health care these days is kind of a joke. It's not very effective for a lot of these chronic conditions. And the best medications that are currently accepted are things like SSRIs, which don't really resolve the problem. They're like band-aids. They paper it over, but they don't really resolve it. Many people say, and it's not a cliche, they'll say that, my ayahuasca session or my psilocybin session or whatever was like 10 years of psychotherapy in a single night. So the power of that is recognized, and they just work. I mean, they need guidance, they need the right setting, they need hopefully the help of experienced therapists, guides, or shamans. Whatever costume they're wearing doesn't matter. The point is, shamans and psychotherapists fulfill very similar functions. I mean, the cultural context is different, the assumptions are different.
Mm.
But the point is that you provide a safe and supportive setting for people to directly have their experience with these medicines and learn what they can. I say the medicine is the teacher, or going to reiterating that a different way, you're the teacher. You are your own teacher. The medicines facilitate your learning, your insights into your condition, and that can lead to healing and resolution. But psychedelics are a bit of they're a threat to conventional mental health care because they don't really fit into the capitalist, the biomedical paradigm where, if you're lucky, you get to talk to a therapist for maybe 10 minutes, and you expect to go out the door with a prescription, probably for some SSRI or other psychopharmaceutical. You still have all the problems. You've just numbed them down. Psychedelics actually
Just,
give you the tool, get to the root of these things
mm.
and actually resolve your question. But it requires a different therapeutic paradigm. I mean, it requires that therapists spend not 10 minutes with a patient, but like hours, and so that messes up the revenue model. but
Yeah.
it is a necessary way to approach it. So these things potentially are going to revolutionize mental health care. And it's about time, because mental health care is not very effective the way it is now.
Totally. I remember I did my very first ayahuasca ceremony back in 2013, 14, I think, about 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And I've spent months preparing. I was in the right hands, the right environment. I was terrified before I did it. It was probably the most courageous decision of my life at that point.
Mhm.
And what happened that night changed, honestly. Like it took months to integrate it, but it actually changed the whole direction of my life. Like the wisdom that came from that, I still struggle to even describe it to this day to people.
So there you are. You're a satisfied customer.
Exactly.
You know,
I was a very nervous customer before.
yeah, well, and that's okay. It's all right to approach these things with a bit of, a bit of butterflies in the stomach kind of thing, because they do deserve respect. And the your nervousness is healthy. It's a sign of
Okay.
respect. You're not playing around here. This is a
Oh
serious
yeah.
business. And I often say in my talks, often the question of faith comes up, and you don't have to have faith to take a psychedelic. Believe anything. In fact, it's better if you don't. What you need is courage. What you need is the courage to trust yourself enough, trust the medicine enough, trust the circumstances enough to take that plunge, to step off the cliff, as it were. And you may find, you may say, oh God, I'm falling into the abyss, I'm completely lost. But then the next thing that happens, wait a minute, I'm floating. This is not, I'm not going to crash on the rocks below. I'll be able to spend some time in these dimensions and learn from it.
Yeah, totally. I am.